In the middle of a sunny day at New York's Central Station, a legless beggar sees a strange man who appears out of nowhere. The man, wearing dark glasses, stands calmly amid the crowd, watching people hurry by. At that moment, a woman screams. Someone has pushed her and snatched her purse. The man with the glasses helps her up just as the police arrive. They decide he is the culprit, although the homeless beggar insists that the attackers were some punks who have already escaped. Nonetheless, the police interrogate the man about his tickets and luggage. He insists he doesn't need any and refuses to remove his glasses, claiming that the light on this planet is too bright. This response immediately raises doubts about his sanity, and the police take the strange passenger away, despite the beggar's final attempt to convince them that the man did not come from the platform, but appeared as if out of thin air. The strange man is sent to a psychiatric hospital in Manhattan. That day, Dr. Mark Powell, finishing work, steps into the hallway and inexplicably notices the new arrival being admitted to the clinic. The man turns and also looks at the doctor for a long time, intrigued. Mark requests to see the new patient's file. His assistant, Dr. Chakraborty, points out that the man does not have a tumor, concussion, or epilepsy. However, his amnesia and delusions remain constant. He does not consider himself human and claims to have come from another planet. It is noted that he was administered a very strong drug, but it had no effect, something believed to be impossible. Moreover, there is no name in his file, nor any record of anyone searching for him, as if he truly came from another planet. Mark invites the patient to his office. The man calls himself PR and claims he is not sick, though he suffers from homesickness for his planet K-PAX, located in the Lyra constellation. Constellation Era, in the original text, appears to mean Lyra, or a similar star cluster. He says he traveled to Earth using light energy, inaccessible to Earthlings. When Mark mentions Einstein's research on the subject, Prat, called Pierre, or PR in this text, likely Prat in the original, cites the scientist's work, pointing out inaccuracies in some of his conclusions. Mark highlights Prat's excellent command of English, and Prat suddenly utters a strange phrase in a completely unintelligible language, sounding like bird chatter. He explains that he only appears human here, but on his planet he has a different shape. This is not the first time Prat has been on Earth. He no longer remembers why he first visited, since Earth is an underdeveloped planet without active tourist routes. After their conversation, Prat goes to the common room, where other clinic patients spend their free time. At first, they look at him disdainfully, but he calmly and kindly describes his planet, which is much larger than Earth and has 7 moons. Meanwhile, Dr. Mark Powell heads home, where his wife and children greet him. Even as he sits down to dinner, his mind remains occupied with work. The next day, Mark shows a recording of his conversation with Prat to his psychiatric colleagues. However, the discussion yields no new insights. Nobody knows how to treat the man or what they should even be treating him for. The following day, Mark continues his sessions with Prat, who unexpectedly eats a banana with the peel on, as if seeing it for the first time. Initially, the doctor tries to help the patient by treating him with condescension, since aliens are not uncommon among psychiatric patients. However, Prat describes K-PAX with such extraordinary detail that the doctor doesn't know what to think. According to Prat, the inhabitants of his planet reproduce reluctantly because it evokes unpleasant, even repulsive feelings. The procreation process itself is very painful and nauseating. Talking about this topic, Prat takes out a notebook and a pencil stub, beginning to take notes. He explains that he must record interesting aspects of the planets he visits, and that this particular facet of human relations had previously escaped his notice. After their talk, Prat tries to get closer to one of the female patients, but the others advise him not to speak with her. She has been in the clinic since she was a child, after a fire in her house, and she hasn't spoken to anyone since then. Another patient, Doris, refuses to eat hospital food or leave her room. Prat asks permission to enter, and upon receiving it, he praises the woman. She confesses that she's not crazy, just a romantic. Meanwhile, Dr. Chakraborty examines Pratt's eyes, which indeed are very sensitive to light. Pratt himself claims that he can even detect ultraviolet light, but Mark cannot believe it. Mark closes the windows and turns off the lights, and Pratt finally removes his glasses. He continues talking about the inhabitants of K-PAX, who do not form families because children are raised by society as a whole. Therefore, there are no special feelings between parents and children. Nor are there authorities or punitive organizations on the planet, since its inhabitants live by principles of kindness. He knows that humans live by the principle, an eye for an eye, a life for a life, but the universe realized long ago how foolish that approach is. Even here on Earth, there were Buddha and Christ who taught kindness, but they were not heeded. It is difficult for extraterrestrials to understand why humans have not gone extinct by now. Later at home, Mark finds his brother-in-law, Steve, visiting. Steve works at an observatory, and Mark asks him to arrange a meeting between Pratt and the leading astronomers, hoping to prove that such a planet does not exist. He asks Steve to prepare a questionnaire on astronomy. The next day, upon arriving at the clinic, Mark notices a patient named Howie, Ho in the text, sitting by the window, looking out. When Mark asks him what he's doing, Howie replies that Pratt told him to find the bluebird of happiness. If he completes 3 tasks Pratt gave him, he believes he will be cured. Mark goes to find Pratt and discovers him talking to another patient, Ernie, who is afraid to breathe the air. Pratt calmly assures Ernie that it is not dangerous and that if he follows his advice, he will recover. The doctor becomes angry, pointing out that it's wrong for Pratt to promise patients they can be cured, but Pratt responds that every being can heal itself. On K-PAX, they have known this for thousands of years. Pratt challenges Mark, asking why, if he's a true doctor, he hasn't cured all these people. Mark has no answer. Pratt hands him a sheet of paper containing his answers to Steve's cosmic questions, hoping to satisfy Mark. Later, Steve calls Mark, completely stunned. Pratt has described the exact location of K-PAX, a planet recently discovered by Steve's boss. However, Steve is certain that no one could have known about it yet. Shortly afterward, Mark takes Pratt to meet several renowned astronomers. Initially, they treat the man with great skepticism, especially when he refuses to explain the principle of interstellar travel. Pratt believes that humanity would misuse this knowledge and could blow up the planet. However, when they ask him to pinpoint the location of K-PAX, the scientists are astonished by the precision of his answers. They are particularly amazed by the accurate calculation of K-PAX's trajectory in its native binary system. Even more bizarre is that the possibility of a planet existing there was only recently discovered by one of the astronomers. Information not yet published and known to only a handful of scientists worldwide. The astronomers are stunned, unable to explain what is happening. Mark suggests that maybe the man is a genius. Meanwhile, back at the clinic, Howie approaches the window and suddenly sees a blue bird. His shouting draws patients and staff alike, and soon everyone in the hospital gathers by the windows. People clap like children, wave their hands, laugh, and hug each other. Hearing the commotion, Mark rushes over and is surprised to see a bright blue bird outside the window. He realizes it is just a common jay, but the changes it brings about in the patients are extraordinary. Doris, who had never left her room, comes out and walks to the window. The girl, who had not spoken a word to anyone for years, turns to Pratt and calls him the bluebird of happiness itself. The next morning, a patient named S, who constantly imagines strange smells, asks Pratt to take him to K-PAX. Pratt expresses regret for not being able to experience the scent of flowers on his planet, but explains that he can only take one person with him. Later, Mark calls Pratt into his office to express his dissatisfaction, since many patients have become agitated by Pratt's promise to take someone to K-PAX, causing arguments among them. Pratt defends himself, saying he made it clear that he could only take one person and that he would choose the most deserving one when the time came to leave. The doctor is perplexed, wondering when and how the man intends to return to his planet. Pratt informs him that he will depart on July 27th at exactly 5:51. Mark is baffled by such precision, and even in his sleep, he continues to question what this date might mean. Waking in the middle of the night, he listens to recordings of their conversations repeatedly, and finally realizes that something terrible must have happened to Pratt exactly 5 years earlier, on July 27th. Such a trauma could have shattered his psyche, and Mark knows he must reach the man's consciousness before this deadline. The next day, Mark invites Pratt to his home, hoping that a normal family environment might make him open up about himself. At first, Pratt behaves calmly, but suddenly, upon seeing the family dog, he runs toward it despite the family's attempts to restrain him. The dog, which usually dislikes everyone, literally jumps into Pratt's arms, shocking everyone. Pratt starts barking as if conversing with the dog, then translates, "The dog is asking the children to stop hiding its favorite slipper and adds that it has trouble hearing in its left ear, so they shouldn't sneak up on it." Later, Mark's wife serves Pratt a fruit salad. As it turns out, he doesn't eat meat. He walks around the yard, plays with the children, and admires the flowers. When he comes back in, Pratt looks at the photographs and asks about a young man in one of the pictures. Learning that it is Mark's son from his first marriage, Pratt talks to Mark's wife about the value of family. She explains that family involves deep concern for loved ones. Pratt replies that families don't exist on K-PAX, so he can't fully grasp their feelings. Back outside, Pratt begins pushing Mark's daughter on the swing, and Mark notices him doing it as if it were once a routine duty for a father. Pratt keeps playing with the children, behaving like a completely normal person until the lawn sprinkler system suddenly turns on. Something changes in Pratt at that moment. He grabs Mark's daughter and tries to move her away from the water jets, shouting about the dangers of water and scaring the girl. Mark and the others are forced to restrain him, and only when the water stops does Pratt immediately calm down. Mark realizes that something profound remains buried within Pratt. He describes the incident to his supervisor, Claudia Billers. When Claudia suggests that Pratt might have violent tendencies, Mark disagrees, explaining that Pratt was genuinely trying to save his daughter from something terrible. Mark deduces that the event that shattered Pratt's mind must have involved water. He proposes using regression hypnosis on Pratt. Billers objects, warning that it is very dangerous, but Mark convinces her by arguing that time is running out before Pratt's self-imposed deadline and that no one knows how he will behave that day. However, while Mark and Billers are debating, Pratt disappears. Other patients calmly report that Pratt has gone to Greenland to finish his report, assuring Mark that he will be back soon and that there is nothing to worry about. The clinic staff search for Pratt everywhere but cannot find him. Only 3 days later, he suddenly reappears in the garden. He tells Mark he has been to several places, mostly up north. An angry Mark insists that Pratt undergo deep hypnosis. During the session, Mark uncovers murky memories from Pratt's past. Pratt remembers a silver coffin belonging to his friend's father, who died in a work accident at the place where cows are slaughtered. Pratt's pulse stops 10 times, clearly showing his distress. Mark urges him to move forward a bit in his memories. Pratt calms down and begins talking about K-PAX again, revealing that he frequently visited his friend when he was sick. His friend's father bought a telescope, and every night he told them about the stars. But now, Pratt says, his friend has lost interest in the stars and only calls him when something bad happens. Pratt becomes agitated again, and they warn Mark that continuing the hypnosis could be dangerous. The doctor wakes him from the trance. Later, Mark orders his secretary to find addresses for all slaughterhouses in the United States, excluding major cities where stars are not visible. Meanwhile, the clinic's patients are arguing over who Pratt will take with him. At Howie's suggestion, they hold a writing contest so Pratt can learn more about each of them and decide who is most deserving. The patients enthusiastically begin working on their entries. Pratt undergoes another hypnosis session. This time, he doesn't go as far. He sees his friend but flatly refuses to name him, though he mentions the year 1985. When asked about his age, he again gives an imaginary number and explains that his friend is 17, but that his girlfriend is expecting a child. His friend will marry, have children, and repeat the same mistakes that destroyed his father. Mark asks Pratt to move forward 2 weeks and allow him to walk through these memories. Pratt describes the year as 1991. His friend calls him for no particular reason. His friend is a knocker who hits cows on the head so they can't exist, a slaughterhouse worker. He lives in a small house surrounded by trees next to a river. He is married to Sarah, and they have a daughter, Rebecca, whose birthday is coming up. After the session, Mark is reviewing his findings when he's told that Howie nearly strangled Ernie. Mark hurries to see the patient and finds a calm, enlightened man who explains that he was strangling Ernie under Pratt's instructions. Having returned from the brink of death, Ernie now understands that there is no reason to fear everything and everyone, since death is always near and humans can't change that. Ernie can now sleep on his stomach, eat fish with bones, and swallow the largest pills. He says he feels wonderful. Howie is also happy to have cured a friend. Another of Pratt's tasks is complete, and Howie is confident he too will be cured. Mark constantly thinks about Pratt's case and continues the hypnosis sessions. One day, he dares to mention the date July 27th, but Pratt insists he's on K-PAX picking mushrooms. Suddenly, he hears his friend calling him and runs to Earth. Pratt sees his friend by the river behind the house. He tries to stop him from taking off his clothes because he wants to leave after doing something terrible. Pratt refuses to tell Mark what happened, saying that even his friend didn't want to know. At the mention of Sarah and Rebecca, Pratt has a fit of rage, screaming and crying, and Mark is forced to wake him. Later, Mark heads to his house, and as he does, a pencil stub from Pratt that he had taken from him falls out of his pocket. Mark examines the remaining numbers written on it and traces them to the store where the pencil was purchased. This leads him to a small town where he finds a newspaper article dated July 28th, 5 years earlier, describing a tragedy in the family of Robert Porter. Mark flies to the town. The sheriff takes him to Porter's old house and recounts the horrific events that happened there 5 years ago. The house has remained abandoned ever since. Nobody wants to live there. At the time, the family consisted of Robert, a slaughterhouse worker, his wife Sarah, and their daughter Rebecca. As the sheriff talks, Mark feels as if he's witnessing the events firsthand. While Robert was at work, an ex-con broke into the house, and what began as a robbery turned into something far worse. The intruder attacked Sarah and then killed her and Rebecca. When Robert returned home and found the criminal at the scene, the strong man broke the intruder's neck as if it were a twig. Then he went to the river and jumped into the water. His body was never found, but Robert was declared dead. Mark is so deeply moved by the story that he cannot hold back his tears. The sheriff shows him the river and asks him to keep secret the identity of the person who was found, saying that he has suffered enough. Mark returns home and upon seeing his own family, realizes that this bond is what makes life worth living. Meanwhile, the clinic's patients organize a party to celebrate Pratt's departure and demand that he announce who will go with him. Pratt gathers the written submissions while Mark shares a drink with him. Pratt advises Mark to spend more time with his family and invites Mark's son to the celebration. He tells Mark that Earth's beings could populate 50 planets and that they are all connected, but on K-PAX, this is not the case. If Pratt does not bring anyone back there, he will miss them. Mark begs Pratt to stay, but Pratt cannot. He must finish his report, though he regrets having lost his pencil. Mark hands him a pen and shows him a photo, trying to prove that Pratt is Robert Porter, but Pratt refuses to acknowledge it. Meanwhile, the patients directly ask who Pratt will take with him. Pratt announces that whoever falls asleep first will receive an extra point. The patients disperse to their rooms. Pratt gives Howie his final task, to stay here and be ready for anything. Mark, exhausted, goes home and falls asleep on the couch, not wanting to miss Pratt's scheduled departure. The hospital falls silent, and only Pratt sits in his bed. The security guards watch the monitors nervously, debating whether he will leave. The appointed hour arrives, but the doctor is late. The sun rises as Mark runs up the stairs. Pratt takes off his glasses and places them on the table. At that moment, the security cameras go dark. Sunlight floods Pratt's room. Just then, Doris steps out of a room, delaying Mark's arrival. When Mark finally bursts into the room, he finds it empty, but then discovers Pratt unconscious under the bed. Pratt is wheeled along the hospital corridors on a stretcher, but those around him seem not to recognize him anymore. Shortly afterward, news arrives that Bess has disappeared from her room, meaning Pratt chose her because in her essay, she wrote that she had no home. Sometime later, Mark pushes Pratt in a wheelchair. The man cannot speak or move, but Mark feels he can hear and understand everything. So Mark tells him that Howie now works at a library, that Ernie has become a crisis counselor, and only Doris remains missing. When Mark asks Robert if he knows what really happened on July 27th, Robert just smiles enigmatically. Mark promises to wait as long as necessary for him to be ready to share his secret. Later at the airport, Mark and his older son reunite, reconnecting and remembering that they are the closest people to each other. In the final scenes, the voice of Pratt speaks about K-PAX. They have long understood that the universe expands, contracts, and then expands again. It will continue this way forever. Everything will always repeat, so it is crucial to correct mistakes because there will be no second chance.
If you want interesting movie recaps, like, share, and subscribe to follow us for more movie recaps.